The silent races, those who watch without interfering. They say the greatest mystery of the universe is not what lies beyond the stars, but what remains silent beneath their light. Because among billions of galaxies and trillions of worlds, silence is the most unsettling sound of all. A silence that may not be absence, but a hidden presence. A presence that watches. For millennia, humanity has looked up to the sky and wondered who else might be out there. We created gods, myths, constellations. But what if those gods weren't metaphors? What if the myths were distorted records of real encounters with beings who have studied us since we lit our first fire? In this video, we'll dive into one of the most haunting hypotheses of cosmic ufology: the silent races, entities that do not interfere, do not reveal themselves, but shape humanity simply through their observing presence. Not through domination, but vigilance. Not through war, but purpose. Why would someone so advanced choose only to watch? And what exactly are they waiting for? It all begins with a pattern that repeats itself across ancient civilizations. Eyes. Eyes carved in stone, painted in caves, embedded in tombs, temples, and masks. The Sumerians called them the Watchers of the Sky. The Mayans believed the star beings would return only when we were ready to understand the language of the cosmos. In Egypt, the Eye of Horus represented not only protection, but constant observation, a higher consciousness that sees all. And some say this symbol was not just spiritual, but literal. Among scholars of the phenomenon, there is a rarely discussed category: the observer races, beings who do not interfere in the course of civilizations, but follow them, as one might watch a child grow. Theories suggest they may be remnants of ancient species, perhaps the first to conquer interstellar space. Civilizations that reached such an understanding of the universe that they ceased acting out of curiosity and began acting out of principle, the principle of non-interference. Could they be the true founders of cosmic ethics, the origin of what we might call the protocol of silence? Modern astronomers identified what SS known as the Fermi paradox. If the universe is so vast and filled with habitable planets, where is everyone? Perhaps they're here, always have been, but chose to remain invisible. This is known as the Great Silence. But there is an even more mysterious variation: intentional silence. The idea that we are not being ignored, but monitored. Ancient records describe visits that ended abruptly. Civilizations that claimed to have received instructions from masters of the stars and were suddenly left to their fate. Atlantis, Lemuria, the Dogon in Africa, the Hopi in America. All tell of instructors from the heavens who taught mathematics, astronomy, architecture, then disappeared. What remained was emptiness, a kind of experiment left without direct supervision. Imagine for a moment that Earth is a laboratory of consciousness, that every evolutionary leap, every historical rupture, every spiritual rebirth has been watched and recorded by beings who prefer cosmic anonymity. Perhaps their goal is not to interfere, but to understand. Not to shape, but to witness. A theoretical physicist from Moscow once proposed a provocative analogy. If an ant builds an anthill in your garden, do you destroy or interfere with it? Probably not. You watch, maybe take photos, maybe study it, but you don't teach the ant to use fire. What if we are to these races, the ants of the cosmos? The signs are everywhere. Reports of triangular craft, hovering without sound. Orbs of light that simply observe. Cosmic drones appearing at key moments in history. Always silent, never hostile. Witnesses describe the feeling of being examined, not threatened. A presence that doesn't communicate but doesn't leave either, as if it were simply recording. In the Hessdalen project in Norway, luminous phenomena have been observed for decades. Objects appearing regularly, moving intelligently, disappearing without a trace. No sound, no interference, only vigilance. When scientists tried to communicate using laser signals, the objects responded with absolute silence. a silence more eloquent than any reply. Perhaps what we call observation is part of a cosmic cycle of learning. Every planet that develops consciousness is accompanied by invisible sentinels tasked with documenting the rise and fall of civilizations. A universal archive in constant update. But if they've been watching for so long, what are they waiting to see? Maybe they're waiting for the moment we stop looking at the sky with fear and start looking with understanding. When we stop asking for miracles and start seeking meaning. When our science and our spirituality finally stop being enemies. Until then, they remain where they have always been. Invisible yet present, silent yet attentive. And that silence speaks louder than anything. Ancient Indian texts speak of the devas, luminous beings who guided early humans only through occasional appearances. In Buddhist scriptures, there are references to formless watchers, consciousnesses hovering around young worlds until they reach balance. In apocryphal Christian writings, the Watchers appear again, this time as angels who chose not to interfere in human destiny. 3 cultures, 3 continents, 3 eras, and the same pattern. The pattern of those who watch but do not touch. But there's one detail most people overlook. In many of these ancient stories, the Watchers are not described as distant gods, but as melancholic beings, almost regretful, as if bound by a promise made millennia ago, the promise never to interfere again. The Book of Enoch, excluded from the official Bible, tells that the Watchers descended to Earth and taught humans knowledge they weren't ready to grasp: alchemy, astronomy, metallurgy. The result was chaos, the corruption of what was meant to evolve naturally. After that, according to the text, the Watchers were condemned to observe in silence, never revealing themselves again. This myth echoes across traditions, as if it were an ancestral memory of a cosmic mistake. Perhaps these silent races are descendants of those same instructors who swore never again to touch humanity's fate. And that would explain the pattern: always watch, never act. In the 20th century, during the space race, military radars captured signals repeating at precise intervals, regular pulses seeming to come from the void. The whole world thought it was a sign of extraterrestrial intelligence. Later, it was discovered they were pulsars, rapidly spinning neutron stars. But among these natural signals, there was one that was never explained, an echo that repeated 3 times and then vanished. Scientists called it the long-delayed echo. The most curious hypothesis suggested that someone somewhere was reflecting our own signal back at us, a cosmic mirror, an observer testing our awareness. Decades later, the Voyager probe left Earth carrying a golden plaque with the sounds and images of humanity, an attempt to communicate with any intelligent civilization that might find it. But what if it didn't need to go that far? What if, upon sending our message, someone nearby, perhaps within our own solar system, simply listened? Some researchers believe the silent races aren't light years away. They're here, not in underground bases or cloaked ships, but in overlapping dimensions, coexisting with us on different frequencies of reality. A kind of vibrational biology. Think of how a radio works. The frequencies are all around, but you only hear the station you're tuned to. Perhaps humanity is still trapped in a frequency too low to perceive who's beside us, and perhaps they know that. When we speak of silence, we also speak of patience. And there's a hypothesis that defines the purpose of these races in almost spiritual terms, the zoo hypothesis. According to it, the universe is a vast ecosystem of evolving consciousness. Advanced civilizations do not interfere with young ones, just as one should never open a butterfly-esque cocoon too soon. To interfere would be to prevent birth. And there are indications that this policy of non-intervention is universal. MIT astrophysicist John Ball proposed in the 1970s that we are being deliberately kept in cosmic quarantine, an educational isolation. We're being observed not because we're fascinating, but because we're still unstable. Our wars, our environmental destruction, our hunger for power, all of it would be seen by more evolved beings as signs of collective immaturity. Just as a scientist doesn't talk to the lab rat, only observes it, perhaps the cosmic silence is a mirror of our own behavior. But there's something that changes everything. In certain South American indigenous traditions, they speak of the invisible guardians, beings who inhabit the air between the stars and appear only to shamans who have achieved perfect harmony with nature. They do not speak. They only transmit understanding. They do not appear to teach, but to remind. This suggests that contact might not depend on them, but on us. That silence is not absence, but invitation. That the true test is perceiving the invisible before trying to touch it. What if the silent races are simply waiting for our consciousness to reach the right frequency? NASA engineer Dr. Norman Berggren stated in 1986 that he had analyzed images of Saturn S rings and found cylindrical structures the size of Earth, emitting energy and controlled motion. He called them living space entities, not ships, but conscious organisms. If that's true, we are facing something far greater than civilizations like ours. We're facing cosmic life forms that transcend matter and biology. These entities wouldn't need to interfere, because they are the observation system itself, a form of consciousness distributed throughout the universe, acting as the eyes and ears of something even vaster. Imagine the entire universe as a living network, with each observer race as a node, collecting data, sensations, stories. Perhaps we too are part of this network, but we just don't know it yet. If so, every star shining in the sky may be more than light. It may be an eye. Every galaxy, a memory. Every silence, a question we've yet to answer. The mystery, then, is not why they don't communicate, but how they do. Silence might be the most universal language that exists. Think about it. When you observe something with total attention, without judging, without wanting to change, without wishing to interfere, aren't you doing the same as they do with us? Aren't you, for an instant, a watching consciousness yourself? Maybe the secret of the silent races is closer than we imagine. Maybe it's a mirror of what we'll become once we overcome our need for control. And when that day comes, when humanity learns to observe without destroying, to understand without possessing, perhaps the silence will finally break. Not with words, but with comprehension. There will be no trumpets, no ships in the sky, no invasions. Only a deep, collective certainty that we were never alone. And perhaps, at that moment, the silent races will stop watching and begin walking among us once more. Until then, the sky will remain quiet. The stars will keep blinking in codes we haven't yet deciphered. And the wind, when it whispers through cold nights, will continue reminding us that the universe is listening and waiting. Now I ask you, what if silence isn't the end of contact, but the beginning? Comment below what you believe. Are we being observed, or do we only imagine the gaze that comes from the stars? And if you want to keep exploring the enigmas of the cosmos and consciousness, watch our next video, where we'll reveal the secret records of the intelligences that shaped human evolution without ever being seen.